Can we talk for a second about tips if you have to interface with law enforcement at a protest or some other nonviolent direct action, particularly if you are concerned that you are being detained or if you get arrested? Now, I'm not an attorney. This is just information that I have gleaned doing various Know Your Rights trainings and also from the Nonviolent Resistance Boot Camp that I attended here in Oregon. If you have other tips or insights, please drop them in the comments because this is by no means an expansive discussion of this issue. As I said in my last video, one of the best things that you can do in advance of a protest is take a Know Your Rights training. You are walking into a situation where you need to know the law better than law enforcement because I promise you they do not know it very well and they are allowed to lie to you. If you are engaged in a nonviolent direct action that is in a public place, it is not on private property, you are not trespassing. For the most part, you do not need a permit and cops cannot ask you to move unless you are obstructing traffic or you are physically obstructing other people. Along with Know Your Rights, it's important that you know the codes, ordinances, and laws of your city because sometimes you may need a permit for things that are defined as a rally or a march, but you might not need a permit for something that's seen as a vigil. Please learn and understand the ways that technicalities can help you avoid conflict with law enforcement. We've seen a number of instances lately. There's videos all over Instagram. I don't have time to go dig them up and show you an example, but you can find them yourself where we are seeing ICE tell regular, bystanders that they are not allowed to record, that they need to stop recording. Recording is a safety measure. It is deterrence in the moment, but also it is documentary evidence for the future. Is precisely why ICE doesn't want you recording. You are legally allowed to photograph and record video in public spaces, including the actions of law enforcement performing their duties. Police cannot demand that you stop, delete your recordings, or require you to hand over your phone without a warrant if you are not being detained. At the same time, you need to understand that your recording cannot interfere with them carrying out their duties, and they will try to position things in a way where they can claim that your recording is an interference. Maintaining your calm, committing to that nonviolent discipline in the moment is really crucial when you're filming. And also knowing your rights. When they say you have to stop filming, say, I'm not interfering with you conducting your duties. I am legally allowed to film. This is a public space. And then just keep filming. So let's say that you have more of an escalated interaction with law enforcement. I know it's really hard, especially if they are violating your rights and especially if they are ICE, who is trying to get you spun up, right? They're trying to get you escalated so that you do something where they can then justify adding on charges like resisting arrest or assaulting an officer. And we are seeing an awful lot of that in Portland. This is where our distress tolerance skills, our work on building emotion regulation, this is where our de-escalation skills so that we can de-escalate ourselves. This is where all of this comes into play. Staying really calm, remembering to breathe. I know that we don't have any respect for law enforcement, but staying respectful is a tactic. It is a choice that can help prevent a situation from escalating. If law enforcement approaches you or it seems like they might be detaining you, you just need to clearly, loudly, again, while you or one of your buddies is recording, ask, am I free to leave? If the answer is yes, you walk away slowly and calmly. We don't run. If they say, yes, you are being detained, please understand that ICE is not Mirandizing people. If they say, yes, you are being detained, you have the right to remain silent. If you are being detained, the number one rule is that you shut the fuck up. Now, if you have to ask something like, may I use the bathroom, or there's some reason that you have to speak, anything that you say after you invoke your right to remain silent, that is now considered you waiving that right to remain silent. So if you say like, I really have to use the bathroom, or what are you doing next? Boom, you have now waived your right to remain silent simply by speaking. The thing that law enforcement doesn't want you to know is that you can invoke that right once again by restating, I invoke my right to remain silent. It's not like if you speak once inadvertently or what have you, that you've now fucked yourself with your right to remain silent. No, you can re-invoke that right at any time. So if you say, I want my attorney, then you can say, I re-invoke my right to remain silent. Now, this is something we have discussed quite a bit in our group here, which is, should you carry an ID with you? If you are detained, if you are arrested, there are two options here. So if you are somebody who says, I want to leave my ID at home, okay, here's what's going to happen if you get arrested. You don't have ID on you. It's going to take a lot longer to process your arrest. You could sit in jail for a few days. If you have your ID on you, that processing happens much more quickly. I choose to carry my ID because I have a family to take care of. I cannot sit in jail for days on end. But you may decide that you don't want to carry your ID as an intentional way that you gum up the works of law enforcement, because you're like, okay, now they have to figure out who I am. I've invoked my right to remain silent. I don't have my ID on me. It could take them days to work through this process. That is using up law enforcement resources. That is gumming up the works. That is a form of nonviolent direct action. So maybe you're somebody who says, yeah, I want to waste their time. I want to use up their resources. This is a conscious choice that I am making. Then you leave your ID at home. But there will be consequences. At least here in Oregon, you need to check the laws of your state. But in Oregon, there will be consequences if you are arrested and you don't have ID on you. It's also important to remember that here in Oregon, giving a false identification, either verbally or some kind of fake ID, that is a criminal offense. We're not breaking any laws. We are non-violently expressing our constitutional rights. The minute you give a fake ID to law enforcement, that then becomes a crime. Now, real quick, let's talk about a search. You never have to consent to a search. So there's a difference between like stop and frisk and a full search. You can and should very clearly, loudly, somebody else is documenting it, say, I do not consent to a search. They may still search you anyway, but now if you have very clearly articulated, I do not consent to a search, what they find on you may not be admissible in a court of law. So you want to go ahead and communicate that, and then, I invoke my right to remain silent. So let's say that you are arrested. Your rights do not end at the curb. Immediately say that you invoke your right to remain silent after you have said you would like to invoke your right to speak to a lawyer. Do not sign or agree to anything without legal counsel present. Never sign anything without your lawyer present. You do have a right to make a phone call. And this is where I would suggest that you take a Sharpie and write the number for the National Lawyers Guild on your arm, especially the state chapter. The national number I will put right here. But go ahead, before you go to a protest, look up your state chapter of the National Lawyers Guild, Sharpie on your arm. Or if you're somebody who is snazzy enough to have your own lawyer, have their number written on your arm. Also understand, if you are making a phone call to an attorney, cops can't listen in and they can't record that call. If for some reason you're calling a family member, don't talk about any details. Likewise, if you are in a jail cell with somebody else, do not talk about the reason you've been arrested, any of the actions that you've engaged in. All of that can be recorded. You need to continue to engage in your right to remain silent. Don't talk to your buddy in the cell with you. Don't talk about anything. By the way, along with your ID, if you are somebody who needs regular medication, please consider carrying that with you at a protest. And we have heard multiple instances where people have been detained by ICE and they are not being given their medication. Please know that you have a legal right to get your medication, and you should go ahead and let law enforcement know. Like, I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic. I have to take an anti-seizure medication. Here's the information, and then re-invoke your right to remain silent. Also, I know it's really difficult in the moment, but we need to make sure that we are not engaging in behavior that could cause law enforcement to trump up a charge of resisting arrest against us. Again, we're seeing loads of this at ICE. Don't resist. Do not resist. You don't have to help them. You can be limp. That's a strategy that you can use. You can be a wet noodle, but you cannot pull back against them. You cannot resist. You cannot link arms. You can't hold on to something. You have to go limp, and you can't jerk away from them either. I know it's really, really hard. Don't kick, don't jerk, don't struggle. They are using anything to justify resisting arrest charges. And make sure, if you are somebody whose buddy at a protest is being arrested, you are documenting everything. Because what we're seeing, especially here at ICE in Portland, is that the charges don't match the video footage. Do not forget that you have a right to be tried in a court of law with a jury of your peers. Right, look at what's happening in DC. I know it can seem really scary in the moment when the regime is determined to charge you with things. We are watching juries render not guilty verdicts. We are watching grand juries fail to indict. Please understand, at the end of the day, the people still have power. We still have power. If you are sat on a jury or a grand jury, it is your duty to make sure that you uphold the rights of your fellow Americans. Lastly, I just want to read this little bit here from our training. Not everyone faces the same risks during nonviolent direct actions. Undocumented people, minors, those on probation or parole, those with medical needs may face harsher consequences if detained. Nonviolent discipline means respecting those realities and never pressuring somebody in your group to take a risk that they cannot afford. Nonviolent direct action is safer, stronger, and more effective when we all understand our legal rights.